Welcome to this celebration of spring. I'm Melissa, the Renaissance coach, and we're going to walk through some powerful symbology embedded in Sandro Botticelli's painting, Primavera. Botticelli is an Italian Renaissance master, and one of his most famous paintings is The Birth of Venus. Botticelli learned his craft under the mentorship of Verrocchio and alongside his fellow student, Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci teaches us that in order to fully understand something, we must look at it from multiple perspectives. To celebrate spring, we're going to take Leonardo's advice and look at this painting from his peer Sandro Botticelli from several different perspectives. Primavera is often referred to in English as the allegory of spring. It was painted by Sandro Botticelli in 1482 and currently resides in the Uffizi Galleries in Florence, Italy. We know that this is a celebration of spring because of the prominence of the goddess of spring, Flora. We also see early spring flowers alongside late spring flowers. We see early spring blooms next to ripened fruit, indicating that this isn't only spring, this is perpetual, eternal spring. Let's start by looking at the most obvious perspective, which is that of mythology. Starting at the right, we've got Zephyr, the god of the west wind, and he is capturing the wood nymph Chloris. And by taking her as his bride, she's transformed into the goddess of spring, Flora. And right in the center, we've got Venus, the goddess of love, also the goddess of fertility and prosperity. She's accompanied by her son, Cupid, who wears a blindfold to remind us that love is blind. The three figures to the left of Venus, hands interlocked in a dance, are the three graces: beauty, joy, and abundance. And rounding out our tale of eternal spring, we see Mercury with his staff in the sky dissipating the clouds in order to allow perpetual spring. Mercury is the god of commerce and prosperity. This painting was a wedding gift for a Medici nephew, and the bride, she was a niece of the Pope. This was a political marriage that symbolized the repair in the relationship between Florence and Rome. Now, this is where it really starts to get interesting. Take a look at the hands of the three graces over the head of the center grace. That symbol that they have above her head could be interpreted as a symbol of the church, showing us that that middle grace is a representation of the bride, and the bride is the niece of the Pope, so she represents Rome. And remember Mercury extending his wand to dissipate the clouds and ensure eternal spring? You guessed it, he represents either the groom or the Medici, and the fact that this marriage will ensure peace and prosperity and eternal spring for Florence. The story of Zephyr and Chloris and Flora sends a special message to the bride. It reminds her of her duty to procreate as we see Chloris turn into the very pregnant Flora. And it's a message that by surrendering to this civic duty, surrendering to this marriage, she will reap abundance and prosperity and great riches. We've seen how this painting has a movement from right to left. If you imagine for a moment the dance that the three graces are doing, you can imagine that that central figure that represents the bride just a moment before was faced in this direction, just as Cupid was releasing his arrow. So we see her in the moment that Cupid's arrow has struck her heart as she faces her gaze towards her husband. This shows that while it was a political marriage, they were wishing the new couple that they would find love in each other, that in their shared values, Cupid's arrow would strike. This was a Catholic marriage in a Catholic society. So it's not surprising that when we look at it through a Catholic lens, we see some very Catholic symbology. For example, when you look at the tree lines, it reminds us of the inside of a cathedral. When we see Venus with her son, Cupid, we're reminded of the many paintings of the Madonna and Christ child. Renaissance masters often used hand gestures in their paintings to imply meaning. In this painting, we see Venus, Mary, making a very specific gesture with her hand. Through this Catholic lens, we see the three graces transform into the three virtues of faith, hope, and charity. And as we look to the right, we see symbols of short-lived earthly love, things like early spring flowers that come and go quickly, like cornflower and strawberry. We see carnal love as Zephyr takes chorus. And Mary is telling us, take your attention away from these earthly delights and put it on living a virtuous life. She leads our gaze towards these virtues and the figure of Mercury, who is connected with his eyes on the divine. Humanism saw the ancient mythology as a precursor to Christianity, in some cases even foretelling the coming of Christianity. For example, Michelangelo included the Sibyls in the Sistine Chapel. Humanism also believed in this concept of the divine within, that humans are made in the image of God, and when we act in virtue, we're acting in the divine. Remember that the Italian masters would sometimes use hand gestures to draw our attention to a specific idea. Take a look at Chloris's hand as she reaches for Flora. Hidden in Flora's dress, you'll see the letter D, standing for the divine within. This tells us that it's not Zephyr's touch that transforms her. It's Chloris's own striving and reaching for the divine within that transforms her into the divine. In this beautiful celebration of spring, Botticelli has left us a masterclass. It teaches us that by living a virtuous life and continuously sowing the seeds of faith, hope, and charity, we get to experience divine reward and live a fruitful life, graced with beauty, joy, and abundance.